Hi, welcome to the Conversation Shop. I have as a very special guest today, Mr. Theron Spencer, my friend, concerned citizen, concerned father, and for my continuing viewers, brother man. So, for all of you who don't know, as I talk on the shows, I offer an opinion where I say the brother man opinion. This is a gentleman, Mr. Theron Spencer, that I respect very much. We have a number of conversations about various topics, and the fact that I respect his opinions, and one of the things that I respect is that he doesn't always agree with me. So um, it gives me a space to think within and keeps me grounded. It gives me an alternate space to view issues within. So Theron, thank you for being on the show, sir.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you for being on the show. Well, as you know, it's the 50th anniversary of Mr. Martin Luther King being killed in Memphis when he did his speech, but also, celebrating his life and celebrating some of the things that he represented. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the major platforms that he stood for was about African Americans and people of color exercising their right to vote and the power in that vote and what comes behind that. So, from me thinking about that last night, I had a conversation with a friend of mine. And during that conversation, we discussed the fact that, or the suggestion that African Americans should not vote at all. And then from having that conversation, it changed into, or it morphed into, African Americans should only vote for a candidate that speaks directly to what he's going to do for the African American community. And once in office and once elected, does those things immediately. And I went to thinking, because it was a debatable, it got a little heated with the conversation. And again, respectfully heated, I should say, in terms of viewing each other's viewpoints. But what it jumped out to me was the fact that it was a valid conversation that we needed to have and that people of color need to have. So the standpoint that I come from, that I believe wholeheartedly, is that there is absolutely, and I'll turn, absolutely no reason that anyone, but specifically a person of color, specifically an African American person, should never, ever choose not to vote. So, what I wanted to do, Theron, before we get into the conversation and diving right into this topic, I want to start by having you just, introduce yourself to my audience. Tell them a little bit about yourself. Tell them who you are. Share anything that you're comfortable sharing with the audience. And if you don't mind, make a statement about where you're at in this space called voting.
Okay, first of all, I want to say my name is Theron Spencer, and I'm married. I'm a family man. I have kids and children, and I'm just I'm not active in the community. I'm not a political activist, but I am. I do my part. To enlighten people with my knowledge about living as an African American in the United States of America.
Okay, okay. Well, I'm very thankful for you sharing that with my audience. But what I would like to do is, I want to hear your statement. You heard me originally start off by talking about Martin Luther King and his focus on African Americans exercising their right to vote. So
Right.
let me ask you, what is your direct opinion when it comes to specifically African Americans voting? Do you have an opinion? Is your opinion, are you in line with mine? My opinion is that all African Americans should vote at every opportunity, and there's no excuse not to vote. That's the stance
Okay.
that I come from. So I
Okay.
want you to express to my audience the stance that you come from.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, is I used to have a standpoint, whereas I always thought that if you were eligible to vote, you should vote. That was my stance at one particular time. Now, by seeing that when I participated in the voting process, nothing ever changed. Nothing ever got did. So I just said, I told myself, and I listened to a couple of people that about their opinion, and their opinion sounded rather good, and I moved towards their opinion.
And what is that opinion?
And that opinion is that, you know, just don't participate in the process. If you're not going to get anything out of the process of voting, and it's going to be the same process over and over, two political parties dividing people and conquering people and not getting anything done, then why participate in something that's not you're not getting anything done?
Well, what specifically, when you say getting something done and getting something out of it, what specifically do you mean?
Specifically, for my standpoint, I'm an African American male.
Right.
I got African American kids.
Right.
So I'm specifically want something done for African Americans.
Okay,
That's
but
what I want something. Specifically, I can't
But
say.
give me some examples.
Some tangibles. Some examples.
community centers.
Yeah, community centers,
Jobs.
fundings, jobs. Just some
Community
protection.
development.
Some protection for one.
Okay.
You know, we need protection, fair justice for African Americans. You know, things like that. You know, I mean, absolutely fair justice. That's one point in this African American. That's we need justice in this American
System.
in this American system, and we haven't gotten that. And that's, you know, and that's, it's real important to me, you know.
I understand.
You know, and that's where I stand as far as that concerned, as far as I'm concerned, from my eyes. But what I have seen was, like I stated before, when I was participating in voting, I've seen elections be rigged, elections being votes not being counted, machines being altered, all type of things. I've been dealing, you know, every election is something like, oh, these machines didn't work.
So you don't trust the process.
The process is just, it's in shambles.
So you don't trust the process.
I do not trust it at all.
Which makes you, therefore, believe or feel, I don't want to put words in your mouth, from what I'm understanding from what you're saying, it would suggest that you voting or someone that looks like you, when they vote, that it's an empty vote.
Well,
is that what you're suggesting?
Well, not only that it's an empty vote, but the process is not geared towards, it's meaningless.
It's a meaningless process.
It's meaningless. I mean, if I go down there and I rushed in to get my ballot in and put my ballot in, then the process is
what happens after that?
Yeah, after the process is some I don't want to use the word janky.
You can use that word. You can use janky. That's the word.
Some janky always happens.
Right. So, but what I want to say is, so what you're talking to me about when we talk about African Americans not voting is you know, you brought up a very valid point. The point that you brought up is that you don't trust or believe that the vote that you're casting is actually going to do something for you. So you're suggesting that you feel disenfranchised from the process. Is that what you're saying?
Is
that what you're saying?
Well, not only.
But yes or no, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay, then what are you saying?
I'm saying this. At one particular time, I thought that it was more smarter to vote in the local process than the national process for the president and things like that. So you want to vote for your judges, your your governor, the local process. You know, somebody in your state. You know, you need that. You know, whatever state you're leaning
So
in.
what changed your mind from that being important?
Because when you have political people, both parties, I saw that both parties were really turning the working class against the working class, and you know they were using like benefits, saying one person was getting these benefits and this working class were the private sector wasn't getting this, and the cities and the Teamsters was getting that, and they used that as a political point. And at the same time, it was a conquer and divide, and everybody's working at the same time. These are all working people they're all working, and they're bumping head against each other, and at the same time, these political figures are getting all these benefits, are the ones that's getting rich.
So you feel like that when you cast a vote, you're not what you think you're going to get or benefits you think you're going to get from that vote, you're not getting, and the politicians that should be representing you are undermining
the whole
the people,
process. Yeah.
are undermining the voting process. They're undermining the people that they claim to be representing, and all they're doing is taking and putting in their own pockets.
And that's exactly what
Is that what you're saying?
From my eyes, I don't know what everybody else is seeing, but I've seen that. I've seen people, I've seen senators. One senator, he had all these. He got fired. Okay, he was fired, and there was I don't know his name right off the bat, but he's back in the private sector. He had businesses, and he was taking money. So
so if I'm understanding what you're describing is, you don't trust the system. Is that
not
correct?
At all.
Well, what we're gonna do on the next segment, when we come back from break, is we're gonna dive into the system. But we're also, before we dive into the system, we're gonna also talk about the average American's understanding of the process and the system first.
Okay.
We'll be right back on The Conversation Shop.
Turn me around, turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land.
Say, oh, oh, come on, let me hear y'all sing it with us. Come on, y'all. Say, oh, you gotta hang on in there. Hang on in there. Say, oh, give a little bit more. Come on, let's rock it out, y'all. Come on, come on. Say, oh, you gotta hang on in there. Hang on in there.
Hi, welcome back to The Conversation Shop. I'm here with my very special guest, Mr. Theron Spencer, and we're going to dive right back into the conversation. Theron and I were having a conversation about, we were celebrating Martin Luther King, the 50th anniversary of his speech in Memphis, and this sad memorial of his death, but celebrating what Martin Luther King stood for. One of the main things that we were talking about was Martin Luther King's dedication to voting, his dedication to it. And then we started talking about ways or reasons why African Americans may feel that they shouldn't vote, or feel that they should only vote in an election, or only be active politically in terms of voting when there's someone that speaks directly to them, and when there's someone that immediately upon getting in office can immediately act upon those promises. So we were talking about Theron's, Mr. Spencer's views on voting, views on whether he feels that African Americans should vote or not. In the first section, we really didn't, get clarification on his feelings on that point, and we'll dive right back into that in this conversation. But prior to going into there, I wanted to just talk about a couple of things. In terms of voting, I want to challenge my audience to understanding what voting actually is. I want you to ask yourself, have you ever taken a civics class? Do you understand how government works? Do you understand how the law works? Do you understand the separation of the branches of government? Do you understand the process of what your vote actually does in your community and how it trickles up all the way up into the federal government? But again, I want to challenge my audience to learn more about the process. The more educated you are in the process, the more educated you'll make your vote. And by being educated in the process, you eliminate, to a large extent, you being disappointed in things that you don't necessarily understand. So as we dive into this conversation, I'm going to talk about a couple of different issues. And one of the issues that I'm going to jump right into, again, after allowing Mr. Spencer to clarify his position on the topic, we're going to talk about the disenfranchisement of African American men because of the criminal system and in jails, and how that disenfranchisement trickles down into them not being able to vote, and trickles into and adds to the perception, the overall perceptions within the African American community that their vote doesn't count. So Theron, I want to dive right back in again. Sorry to get a little long-winded, but I want you to state very clearly to my audience and to me, how do you feel about this? Do you think African Americans should vote no matter what, like I do? Do you feel that African Americans should not vote at any time? Or do you feel that African Americans should only vote for candidates that make a specific statement to their communities, make specific promises to their communities, and then once they're in office, they have an obligation to immediately do something?
Okay, and thanks for the question.
Mm-hmm.
As I stated earlier, I feel that this voting process is broken, severely broken, with these parties.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that right now that I don't participate.
So you don't vote.
I do not. I haven't
You
voted
don't
in
vote.
2 years. I have not participated.
So you don't think African Americans should vote?
I'm not saying I don't think African Americans should vote. I said I'm not participating, but I have a reason for not participating.
Do you have an
I can
opinion?
tell you. I can tell you what I do think.
What do you think?
I think that African Americans need to come together collectively as a unit and come together and place their vote with a particular candidate if you choose to vote.
Right.
Place your vote with choose your candidate and vote as a unit.
Right.
And
But that's
and
what most
then-
people who vote do. That's
well,
what they
okay,
do.
okay, that's the voting process. But I'm just saying, the whole for the majority African American people, they need to come together as a unit and vote as a unit together and get some tangibles out of the voting process. Get a candidate that's going to specifically do something for their race.
Okay. Now
know?
I'm gonna,
Yeah.
and it's as you know, it's a reason I'm asking you
That's
this.
right.
So my question again is, I understand all of that. So in those circumstances, if they're not getting that, should they vote?
Should they participate? If they choose
This is only from your perspective.
Yeah, if they choose to participate, I'm not.
From your perspective,
From my perspective,
would you vote? Let me say that, since you don't want to speak for it, because we've had this conversation, so I know what your opinion is. So I'm going to ask you here. So from your perspective, would you vote? Let's make it there. Let's make it specific to you.
I tell you what. Under the circumstances as we sit today, no.
You wouldn't vote. I just want your honest
Okay,
opinion
okay,
about it. I know what it
okay,
is.
No.
So you wouldn't
Absolutely.
vote. Right.
No.
So
I
again,
wouldn't participate. No.
and the reason that you don't want to participate, and the reason that you would suggest to someone that looks like you, if you had a conversation about why you weren't participating, you would share with them why you're not participating, and the reasons why would be because I'm listening to you, would be mainly you don't trust the process. And from listening to you, it suggests to me, from listening to you, my understanding of what you've been saying, it suggests that, again, you don't trust the process and you don't think that when you cast your vote, as we said, janky, right? Once we cast, it gets real janky after you cast the vote. So you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if the person that you voted for is going to do the things that you had hoped and wished they would do for your community. Is that?
No, that's not the
Then
problem.
please, I'm not stating a problem.
Okay,
I'm
right.
asking you very specifically your stance.
Okay, yeah, my stance
If
is
you don't have a stance and you're in a
when
gray, say that.
when I said something janky, I was referring to or stating that like if I go down there and vote,
Mm-hmm.
then the machines going to be broken,
I hear what
or
you're saying.
something like or something or some
So you don't have an opinion, really. You just don't trust the process.
Some unfamiliar circumstances going to happen, and then some unforeseen circumstance going to happen where these ballots didn't get counted. We had these
I hear
over
that.
here, and then the other person's going to win anyway, or whoever has the most money is going to win anyway.
So you don't trust the process,
The
basically.
process
Okay.
is just.
That's your point.
Yeah.
So the point is, the one thing that you're willing to tell me is
Yeah.
you don't trust the process. Is that correct?
That is
And
correct.
because you don't trust the process, you specifically don't vote.
I don't
Well, there's a
participate.
lot of people out there that look like you. Now, one of the main things I wanted to talk about and dive in to get your perceptions on and opinions on, we all know in our communities, we know a lot of people that are disenfranchised because they've been to jail, they're felons, they have criminal records. We understand, if I'm not mistaken, it's about 6.1 as of 2016 million African American men that are disenfranchised from the voting process just by being convicted felons. That's a large percentage of our population. Now, the reason I brought that up is because as I reach out into the community and I have different conversations, I talk to brothers and I talk to people that look like me that suggest that because they feel that there's a active, and I would agree to a large extent, an active, how should I say, focus on disenfranchising people of color through the criminal justice system. And by doing so, it's to take all of our rights away, right? But so how can you take those rights away if the vote doesn't have any power, right? So the vote has to have power if you have someone that has a concerted effort to disenfranchise you, to take that away from you, right? So you have a lot of brothers, you have a lot of people that look like us, a lot of brown and black people that are coming out of jail, and the suggestion is, and which is the suggestion that I agree, that getting them back involved in the process of voting should be something that's intertwined with their rehabilitation, because it attaches them to their community. It attaches them to their civic duties. It makes them more responsible in their communities. And it makes, to some extent, it makes them feel whole in terms of their participation as a citizen. So again, when we have taken those rights away from those gentlemen, would you agree that's one of the reasons that you don't trust the system?
Well,
Or tell me how you feel about that.
I'm trying to figure out
The
what questions
disenfranchisement. The question is the disenfranchisement of African American men through the criminal justice system, meaning locking them up, putting them in prison, and then when they get out, if you're a felon, you can't vote.
Right.
Right? So that's a disenfranchisement. So how do you feel about that? The distrust that you have in the system, is that part of the distrust?
About them coming back into the system and then starting to vote
About
again?
the system putting them in jail to take that vote away from them?
Oh, well, first of all, I want to say this. I've never been incarcerated, so
I understand that.
I would feel that I guess if they feel like they've been wronged in some type of way, and they feel like the vote, if they voted or the candidate that they're voting for don't have their best interests at heart, yes, they probably are not going to want to participate in in the due process of voting.
No, I understand, but the point I wanted to make was they don't have a choice because they're getting out of jail. When they got locked up and they became a felon, they were disenfranchised. They can't participate. They can't vote. If they went and tried to vote,
But now when they're released,
they would be, when they're released, they wouldn't be allowed to vote. So they're completely disenfranchised.
Oh.
But what we're going to do, and we're going to talk about that a little bit since that surprised you when we come back from the break.
oh, okay.
Guys, we'll be right back on the Conversation Shop.
If you believe it, come on, put your hands together with us. Well, we shall overcome someday.
Hi, welcome back to the Conversation Shop. I'm here with my very special guest, Mr. Theron Spencer, and we're into this real deep conversation. Real deep. I'm on here with the brother man that came out. This is Brother Man here. Brother Man has come out of the closet. He's here on the show. What we were talking about on the last segment was the disenfranchisement of people of color through being arrested, charged, sent to prison, and then when they get out, the disenfranchisement comes from them not having the ability to vote. And when I said that to you, Mr. Spencer, you looked really, really surprised. Like that was something you just went way over your head. That was real janky, right? That was janky. So tell me about that. Talk to me about why that surprised you.
Well, I'm still surprised because I was under the impression that once you was released and you got out of jail and served your time, that you can come back and be and vote again, and all your rights will be given right back to you. Now that I didn't even know that was law.
Yeah.
I never knew that a person that was incarcerated or a convicted felon couldn't vote for the rest of his life.
Couldn't vote. And
Or
what I'm going to do.
participate in the voting process. I didn't know that.
And what I'm going to do is challenge my audience who are surprised by this to go and give yourself a civic education. Go look up the law and find out and validate that for yourself. But there's 6.1 million people of color, brown, black people, as well as all Americans who are caught up in the criminal justice system. It's unfair for all of us, but specifically brown and black people. And what happens is we're disenfranchised because they're basically taking our votes from us. And it takes away from our political power. It takes away from our influence. It affects us all the way. It's a trickle down, all the way to every aspect of our lives. So before we go into the next topic to discuss, I want you to tell me how that makes you feel, Darren. You know, we talked about previously how you don't trust the system, how the system is a little janky. You put a vote in and you don't know what happens after that. You would hope someone could come in and be concerned about the African American community because you're an African American man. So your first priority is, life, liberty, and justice, for people who look like you in your community, which all of us wants for our own communities. But having someone coming in willing to actually do what they say. You're right. The key word is do what they say and be concerned. So you being disenfranchised from that or feeling like that makes you not want to participate, how does the fact that you know now that we're being purposely disenfranchised by putting us in prison, giving us charges, and not saying not saying people aren't committing crimes, right? Because if you commit a crime, you do the crime, you got to do the time. Mm-hmm. But the results of that is large numbers of people being disenfranchised and not being able to vote. How does that make you feel?
Well, now that I'm here, now that we're having this discussion, and me hearing myself talk,
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing that this vote is being kept from us,
Mm-hmm.
and being kept from people from participating
Mm-hmm.
in the vote. So I'm I'm swayed against, is this really something that I should be participating in,
Mm-hmm.
or
That's valid.
or is this something that I need to continue to to not participate in.
Well-
And I still have to say that, you know, my beliefs are still going to remain the same. If it's going to still be the status quo of these two political parties jockeying for a position and turning people against each other, then, you know, especially working people, if two working class people is going to be, you know, banging heads against the same issues, against the same issues, really they are. And then everybody else is the higher tier people, what you call that upper class,
Right.
is getting wealthier and wealthier and wealthier by getting more
You're talking
accessible to property, accessible to health care, and they're getting to hoard this money and being able to capitalize off of everything that's going on.
You're talking about fair leadership. What
You know-
you're talking about is
I would still say I wouldn't say participate. I still would say, you know, let's find, this system is clearly broken, and we need to find something better to do. We need to find another system.
okay. So you
I
basically.
think this whole system is outdated.
I understand.
I really do. I think this legislative system is very outdated.
No, I understand. So basically, if I'm understanding you, you know, which a lot of people agree, the two-party system is run its course. So there need to be multiple parties with real candidates. It sounds like, you know, you're looking for leadership like everybody else. You're looking for an honest person, honest man, someone that comes in and gives real leadership to drive this country in a direction that brings everybody together. I think if we had a strong person that was leading, and that had great moral fortitude, that he could get the people behind him. And by getting the people behind him, I think it would entice more people to get involved in the political process. But one of the things I wanted to talk about real quickly was a quote. And one of the quotes, one of the reasons I'm gonna read this quote is because it's one of the things that when I talk to people of color, it's one of the reasons why they're suggesting it's a reason not to vote. And I'm gonna read it out loud. And basically it says that you cannot rise above your oppression by integrating with your oppressors. And what they meant by that is integrating with your oppressors, meaning by participating in the processes, by participating in a system that's designed to keep you down, that's designed to keep you poor, that's designed to keep you disenfranchised. There's no purpose in participating. And when I hear those things, it sounds crazy to me, to be honest with you, because in order for poor people to gain power, they have to be engaged. They have to be engaged in the acquiring of that power. They have to be engaged in it in order to acquire it. You can't choose to just sit by the sideline and just watch. So, for instance, if you don't vote, right, and you have a really bad candidate that gets into office, and that candidate is doing everything he can to degrade your community or doing negative things in the state or city that you live in, do you have a right to be upset then, since you didn't participate in the process? Because as far as I'm concerned, you don't have nothing to say. Because if you wanted to have something to say, then you would participate in the process and you would understand that your vote actually means something. You know, so again, I just wanted to say that. So prior to going into the next break, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to some of the things that I talked about.
Well, first of all, I want to say about that one leader that you said we need a leader that's going to. I don't think that. I don't think we need a leader. Mm-hmm. I think what we need is a group of people, group of leaders, a group of leaders, not just one leader. Mm-hmm. We need a group of leaders, and leaders can consist of a group of head men in the community coming together, head women coming together as leaders in the community.
When we're talking about politics, though, You can't have multiple leaders. So
Okay, okay.
in the context of when I said leaders, in the context of when I said leaders, I'm clarifying for you.
leader, you
I'm,
said.
I'm clarifying for you so you understand what I meant. When I said leader, you made a suggestion about politics. You voting for someone, right?
Yes.
Voting for someone. So a leader is the person that you're voting for. Someone, the context in which I am referencing to you.
I get it.
Okay? Because you dove in on the
Now-
leadership. I'm clarifying.
Okay.
So what I meant by that is for my audience as well, not just for you. So for what my audience, the clarification is when I said leader, it meant the person that you're voting for. So in
Okay.
order for you to get behind the person that you're voting for, they have to have certain characteristics or you don't trust them. Because everything that you've been saying here on the show is about non-trust. It's coming out very clearly with the voting process. It's
I have
non-trust.
no-
Don't trust the process. Don't trust the politicians. Don't trust the people. Don't think nothing's coming from it. It's non-trust. So that's
Well-
when I was talking about leader. My question to you was, if you had a leader that you could trust, would that change your position on voting?
I would have to think about that. I would have to weigh that out because I'm not really, I'm not really clear about, about that leader thing. I'm still with multiple people governing their own community. But before I do want to say this, that other communities, if they're on the sideline and they are not participating in the voting process, they need to circle their wagons and come together in their own community and just build from within and then go out.
So how are they going to build from within? Talk to me about that. Because what do you mean when you say build from within? What does that mean?
Well, that means that they are just just building from within. They are just concentrating on their own community, concentrating on getting their own selves together first, and then coming together as a collective unit, and then trying to see what they can do about the whole getting into the
Right, but they're
political
not
process.
participating in any kind of political process.
Well, we'll find
So-
out when we get some leaders. Then we'll move forward with that.
So are you suggesting that until that community gets leaders that they shouldn't participating in the voting process?
Until we, well,
Is that what you're suggesting?
No, well, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. I respect that. I don't agree with that opinion, but I respect that opinion. Wholly. Well, hold that thought. We're going to go right into our next break, and we'll be back.
And we'll rise up high like the waves. We'll rise up in spite of the ache. We'll rise up and we'll do it 1,000 times again. To come the best is yet to come.
Hi, welcome back to the Conversation Shop. We're going to dive right back into my conversation with Mr. Theron Spencer. We're talking about voting, and we're specifically talking about aspects or thoughts of African Americans should vote, and African Americans should not participate in the process for various reasons. And let me be very clear. From my standpoint, there's absolutely no reason for any person of color, specifically African American, not to vote. With our history, with the sacrifices that have been made prior to us being where we are right now, to me, it's like spitting in the face to everybody that came before us. So I challenge everyone to vote, and specifically anyone that looks like me, to participate in the process. And if you're disenfranchised, I ask you to take the time to learn about the process, learn about civics, learn about the importance of your vote before you just jump out on the limb and say it's not important. And before, we dive into this next segment, I just want an opportunity to share with my audience why voting is very important and why your vote is important. The main thing that I want to talk about is one vote really does make a difference. It actually influences community. It influences funding and monies that are being allocated to the communities. It influences the numbers of representatives that you have in your community, the House of Representatives, the Senate, and it has a trickle up to Supreme Court justices, appellate court justices, school boards. So it affects all of our communities as a whole. And when you don't participate in the process, I'm sorry. Matter of fact, I'm not sorry. When you don't participate in the process, then you have absolutely nothing to say. Nothing to say. You don't have a dog in the fight. You don't have a stake in the game. You don't have a dollar on the bet. You're not in the crap game. I don't know any way to say it. You're not a participant. And you have to ask yourself in life, do you want the cars to pass you by because you were too afraid to play the game and too afraid to learn how to play? Or do you want to get on the track and drive and learn how to be an active participant in life? Because the only way that you can change the space that you're in is through participation. Now, Darren, I tell my audience all the time about the brother man perspective, but I want to give you this opportunity because we've been talking, but I want you to clearly state and share with me how you feel about this issue, and I want you to wrap this last segment up for me. So for my audience, we're going to have the brother man perspective. And Darren, I want to defer to you.
Okay, and I want to just say this. I want to start by saying at one particular time, and this happened for a lot of years, I did vote because I felt that my ancestors fought for my right to vote. And I felt that it was my duty. I said, my right, all my ancestors, they died for us to vote, and I was real fired up. So I just vote on that GP alone, just on GP. I'm going down there just voting just on that.
Okay.
After the vote, and I saw my vote, it wasn't doing nothing. I wasn't the justices, the Supreme Court justices were getting appointed by governors, and the Koch brothers was putting all this money towards.
Right.
Money was influenced with all these politicians with this money and this capitalism. I said, I didn't see why I should continue to go down there and vote. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, there are civic things that does count when it comes to voting, like the safety regulations at your job, minimum wage, things like that. That does come into play, but that's for everybody. That's just that's not specifically for African Americans, or that's not for Caucasians. That's not for Indians. That's not for a Pacific race. That's for everybody. So civically, we know that those issues are going to be put in place anyway, I think, me, myself. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that's neither here nor there. Mm-hmm. As far as the voting process, you going down there and actually, and everybody, not just me or African Americans, everybody just participating in the voting process and believing that the voting process is going to be able to be justified or either be counted fairly or done fairly, and believe that it's going to be a fair process. It's not about fairness. It's all about winning. So when people want to have different agendas and things like that, and money comes into play like that, then you can't participate. I still my participation is just null and void. Okay. At this point. I mean, when you're up against big money and people that's appointing justices and putting people in offices and appointing people in certain positions and things like that, what's your vote doing? I don't see where the vote counts. I don't see where African Americans particularly are going to be benefiting from that. Yeah, I don't see where African Americans are benefiting from this voting process at all. From that standpoint. Now, as far as the money is concerned, as far as people going out casting your vote for allocating money to get the funding for your schools, or either get the safety equipment for your job, or either get the minimum wage hiked up, things like that. I can see you voting for something like that, but like I said, that's not specifically for Africa. Everybody can jockey, getting a piece of that. That's not just for African Americans.
So you want something specifically for African Americans?
Well, that's what I said. When it comes down to African Americans going to vote, we need to definitely circle our wagons and get together and try to, get behind somebody that's going to parlay that into something.
Okay.
That's going to get some tangible out of it, something out of specifically for African Americans.
Then let me ask you this. Then, tell me, what would make you vote? What would get you excited and get you to the polls? What would make you exercise that right?
Wow, that's a tough question. Just to see I just want to see the political process be done without a hidden agenda, without big money going into it, without these campaigns, with everybody's going and jockeying for position and appointing people. I just need to see some type of trust,
Right.
some type of trust going back into the system. That, for me, it's just broken.
Right.
It's just really, really broken to a point where I just don't want to participate in it right now.
Well, I understand very clearly, Darren, and I respect you for sharing your opinions with me and with my audience. I want to share with my audience as well. I think your opinions and your reflections are reflections of feelings that exist within the African American community and within disenfranchised communities across the United States. What jumps out to me again, and what I hear over and over again, is the distrust with the system. It's the distrust in the system in terms of feeling like the system is broken and doesn't work. It's distrust in the system, feeling like your vote means absolutely nothing. It's distrust in the system, disenfranchising people and making Americans not even want to learn about the process, to learn about why your vote is valuable and how to become more active in that process. And the reason why it bothers me so much is because I feel they've been lying to us. And specifically, they've been lying to groups of people of color, specifically black people, to disenfranchise us. Because again, when you have efforts across this country and throughout history to disenfranchise you and to take away your vote, to keep you from voting, when someone does that, it's an indication that you have something of power. It's an indication that you have something of influence. Otherwise, why would there be such a huge effort to disenfranchise you and to keep that right from you? So what I challenge people of color is to look into the reasons why they want to take that vote from you. Because if you understand why they want to take that vote from you, then you can understand, it helps you understand the value of that vote. And prior to moving forward on the show, I just want to share with my audience real quickly the reasons why voting is very important. I touched on it very briefly, but again, I want to be very clear. One vote really does make a difference. It's your money. We pay taxes in our communities, out of our pockets, out of our paychecks, to go into state and local as well as federal. So your vote, exercising your vote, it's a right that comes with the money that you're paying into your communities on a monthly, weekly, and daily basis. Voting promotes change. As African Americans, as we came out of slavery and we went through Reconstruction, we went through a lot of different things in our communities. We saw the value in holding political positions. We saw the value in voting and having and participating in the process. And from that process, we've had great change. Now, I've had conversations with people a lot that feel like we haven't had any progress until I talked to my 85-year-old grandfather prior to him passing, and he was blessed. He felt blessed because he never thought he would live a day to see an African American president, right or wrong, good or bad. He never thought his vote would even have that kind of influence to get someone that looked like him into office. And for me, that's validation in the process. Is the process flawless? No, it isn't. There's flaws in every process. There's no 100%. But because it's not 100% doesn't mean that we shouldn't participate. And I want to leave my audience with just some excerpts of the celebration from Martin Luther King's 50th celebration of his speech in Memphis, and the celebration of his life and his dedication to voting. I want to thank Mr. Theron Spencer for taking the time to come on my show and to have this very sensitive and honest conversation. And prior to thanking my audience for joining us, Theron, would you like to leave my audience with some last words?
I just want to say thanks for having me, and if hopefully someday in the future I'll probably change my opinion or change, something will happen.
I hope so.
Something may happen where I can fully trust the system, man, and it'll work for me in that way where I can participate and I feel comfortable participating again, because I really would like to start participating. But until I figure until it gets fixed or until something happens that's better, then I'll just leave it as it is for now.
And I respectfully respect your opinions and your viewpoints, and I thank you for sharing. I want to thank you all for joining us on The Conversation Shop. See you next time. Thank you.
Dr. King went to see the president, Lyndon Johnson, and Lyndon Johnson said, "I'm sorry, Dr. King, we just had a civil rights bill in July of '64, and it's just December of '64. I cannot go back to Congress. I don't have the power." And when we left, I asked Dr. King, I said, "Well, we really need a rest. Why don't we just take a few weeks off?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, what you gonna do?" He said, "We're gonna get the president some power." I said, "Huh?" He said, "I said we're gonna get the president some power." I said, now you Morehouse colored people. Y'all are so arrogant, you gonna get the president some power. And then I realized he was serious. And he said, "No, we're gonna get the president some power." I did not understand it, but 2 days later, Amelia Boynton showed up in Atlanta and said, "You got to come to Selma to help us." And lo and behold, that was Bloody Sunday. And on Bloody Sunday, wasn't just an ordinary Sunday, but it was a cold Sunday all up north. And on the only thing playing on television that if anybody was interested in was Judgment at Nuremberg. And so all of the Jewish community and all of the liberal Christian community and all of the people of goodwill who understood what Hitler had done to Germany realized it was happening in their own Alabama. Well, I could go on with the details, but the conclusion is that before the end of March, Lyndon Johnson, who had no power in December, stood up before the Congress of the United States and introduced the Voting Rights Bill. And a poor bunch of Baptist preachers with no money, no army, no nothing but faith and the power of the Lord found that we were able to not only give the president power, but that's where we began to raise up our people to vote and to redeem the soul of America.